Click. Hello and thank you for joining us today here at the Bramble Patch. My name is Wendy and on Technicals today we have Alicia. Today we're going to be looking at how to make a peg bag. And the reason we're going to do this, both of my daughters suddenly announced they needed new peg bags and thought rather than purchase them, why don't we actually make a pattern and make them ourselves. So I've trialled several different ways and this is the way that I've come up with that I think is really neat. So as you can see from this one, this has got a small oval cutout. They're fully lined to make them a little bit stronger. And you can obviously see the inner lining through the gap where you put your hand to get the pegs out. The lining on this side doesn't show, so if it's a different fabric it doesn't matter. And rather than use just pieces of fabric, if you wanted to, if you have any squares left from a charm pack or layer cake, you could actually piece the fabric and then just use it as a piece and then cut into it. So that's the first one that I made, which has got the oval, the small oval opening on there. So just pop that one up there. The second one I made is the same shape, but this has got a larger opening to it because when I'm at work sometimes my youngest son will hang my washing out and he's got very large hands. So I want to make sure that it's not going to get ripped or torn or pulled. So I made one with an actually larger gap to see how that would work out. So that's that one. I had some fabric left over from making a tote bag that I made last year. And I've got just enough to make myself this peg bag. So there's this one. And the fabric on the inside of this one was actually a fabric that I used for a quilt, the backing fabric for a quilt about 4 years ago. And I've still got a few scraps of that left because it was an extra wide that I used. So I've made that one, and that one's obviously got the circular opening on that one. And this is the last one that I did. Obviously you can make the opening any shape you want to. If you want to do triangles, rectangles, whatever. This is one that I've made for my youngest daughter, Amy. And again, this has got another slightly different shape. So it's virtually a semicircle. And that's rather nice as well. So obviously when you're going to be making a peg bag, you're going to need a coat hanger. I've used children's coat hangers. I did actually order these in for myself because I wanted particularly to have a wooden one. Because the reason I wanted this is because you can turn the top around so that can go on the line or hang on a hook or something when you take it inside the house. So I've used a wooden one, but this has got the bar across it. So you have to make sure that the opening is underneath the bar, which I'll show you how to do. These are coat hangers. This one doesn't have a bar, so the opening can start higher up on that one. And these are just plastic ones, but the top doesn't turn, so it's a fixed position on this one. But you do have to take into account these little hooks at the bottom here are not going to protrude below the bottom edge of the fabric before the opening is where you're going to put your hands. So I'll pop those to one side. So first of all, what you need is some fabric. And if I just take these to start with. So you need 2 pieces of fabric for the outside, and then you need 2 pieces of fabric for the lining, okay? And to work out the size that you want your fabric to be, you need to take your coat hanger, and you can either just measure it or you can actually work it out on your cutting mat if you want to. So basically, you want the width of your fabric to be at least an inch wider than the widest part of the coat hanger. So you want it at least an inch wider than this edge to this edge, okay, from here to here, all right? Then what we need to do is to lay it down and then work out the length we want this to be. Now, to work, you can decide obviously what shape you want the opening to be. I actually used a plate to do the circular one. You can see this is just a scrap piece of paper that I've used. I drew the circle and then just cut it in half if I wanted to do the semicircle. This one is actually done from the lid of my cheese grater at home, which I didn't bring in with me. So I just drew around that and cut that out. And that actually was a perfect size. So what you need to do is lay your coat hanger down, position the shape that you want your opening to be, at least half an inch below the bottom edge of the coat hanger. Okay, so because this has got the wooden bar here, but in actual fact, this part of it is slightly lower. I'm hoping you can see that. So it needs to be at least half an inch lower than this lowest part of the coat hanger. So lay that one down. And if I was to position that there, that's going to be fine. And then you just work out how much longer you want the peg bag to be. To be honest, the length of a fat quarter is more than enough. The longest that I've done them are 19 inches. And the width that I've cut for these particular coat hangers was 13 inches wide. Okay. If you've got a bigger coat hanger, it will need to be wider. If it's deeper coat hanger, you can actually make it longer. Or if it's a narrower one like this one, okay, you can actually position the shape slightly higher up. So therefore, the depth of the peg bag would be longer. You don't want it too long that you can't actually get down to the bottom if you've actually got it hanging up on a washing line. So just bear that in mind, what you want it to be. So once you've decided on the measurement that you want, and I can't give you a fixed measurement because I don't know the size of your coat hanger, okay, but that's how you work that out. And then once you've got that measurement, I would then cut 2 pieces of fabric, one for the front, one for the back, and then 2 pieces for the lining as well. So you've got 4 pieces of fabric in total. On average, mine have measured 13 inches by 19 inches. Okay, so that's the fabric that you need to actually start off with. Once you've got your 4 pieces of fabric, you need to take the top edge and just press it over and just run a seam allowance across the top. Okay, this isn't going to show. In actual fact, you only really need about the 3 inches in the centre turned over. The first one I didn't do this, and you could see fibres coming through the top of the opening. So I decided it's easier to actually turn the whole lot over and just hem it using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I did that to all 4 pieces of fabric. So then you know that this is the top edge of the peg bag. Once we get to that stage, just take this one down. Once we get to that stage, all we need to do then is, oops, put that on there. We then need to place the front of the fabric and a lining fabric right sides together, all right? And I've drew on this one purely because it's easier for you to see on camera. I don't normally draw at this point, but I've done it just to try and highlight it. So this is the top edge here. I'm hoping you can see. And this is the edge that I've actually hemmed. And I've put just 2 pins to make sure that that top edge is flush with each other. So they're laying on top of each other. Now, I'll take this hanger. All I've done then is lay, first of all, fold your fabric over in half and crease it down the middle. So you've got your centre point, because we want the coat hanger to be positioned right in the centre. So take your coat hanger and lay it at the top edge of your fabric, but make sure you've still got a little piece, I'm just going to move that here, left here, because this is the part that we're going to tuck inside to make sure that we've got no loose threads coming through. And as you can see, I drew around this one just to try and make it easier for you to see. Now, when you lay your coat hanger on the fabric, you need to draw a line about 1/2 inch either side of the actual hanging part itself, because we need to make sure that we can actually pass that through the top, okay? And if you want to, you can draw just around the edge there. Because you've creased it in the middle, the hook that comes out, once you've placed that on your crease line, you know you've got your coat hanger central on the fabric, okay? And on this one, I've actually drew a line across it just so that you can see the positioning of where I've put my shape. So this one's going to have the oval in it. So once you've done that, take your oval or your circle, whatever you want to do, fold it in half and crease it really, really well. Because then, because you've got your crease line going straight down the middle of your fabric, you can place the crease of your shape on your creased line, and again you've got it absolutely central on your peg bag, like so. So once you've got it placed on there, just pin it in position, and then all you're going to do is you're going to sew right the way around, just off of the edge of the paper. You're not sewing the paper to it, you're just sewing around the edge of the paper. Okay, so just to recap, you've already put a 1/4 inch seam on the top, you've laid your coat hanger down, you've put a marking at the top, and we now know we've positioned this 1/2 inch away from the bottom edge of the coat hanger. Once you've sewn that all the way round, what you're going to do then is to cut that out. So I'll just remove those, like so. Now, you will remove your paper, like so, and now what you need to do is you need to cut the inside of it away, like so. And I've cut about 1/4 inch all the way around, like so, okay? And that's what you get left with, so that can go in my scrap bag. So now we've got the oval. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this through, and trust me, it is not difficult. It's really, really simple. You'll be amazed how good this works. So I'm just going to take the pins out of the top that I put them together to make sure that everything is in the right position. And all you're going to do is take the top fabric, like so, and you're going to push that straight the way through. I'm just going to turn this around because I want this to use this as an ironing board. I'm just going to pull this all the way through, like so. There we go. Now, the easiest thing to do that I've found, right, is to actually get the edge of your fabric and actually level it up with the lining. And literally, as you pull it together, it all just falls through, like so. And this edge as well. I just pull that through like that. Right, now these paper bags can actually be reversible if you slip stitch the final section, okay? So I've pulled that through, and that sort of, it's in its position. So what I like to do is take it through. This is going to be the lining fabric. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ease that so I can just actually see a tiny, tiny piece of the front section, because I don't want to see the colour of this actually on the front part. So all I'm going to do is just feed that around like so, just so I can give that a press, making sure that I can see a tiny, tiny piece of the grey as we go round. I'm just going to give that a little tweak. And once you've learned this method to do this, you'll be surprised actually that you can incorporate this technique into different parts of patchwork. So it's actually quite a nice little thing to learn how to do. So that's the lining press. So I'm just going to turn that over now and just give that a final press. And you will see, hopefully, once I pull that out, just going to give it a little squirt. I do like to use the best press. It just gives it a really nice finish to it. Now, there we go. So I'm hoping you can see from there that that's actually turned through really well, and you can't see any of the lining fabric. However, it's as equally as neat on the reverse side. All right. So once we've got to that stage, all we do now is literally pop it under the sewing machine and run a 1/4 inch stitch all the way round. Again, it takes 30 seconds. It's really, really quick. Okay. So that just needs a top stitch all the way around. I've already got one prepared because I'm very aware of the timing that we have. So here we go. This is one that I'm in the middle of making for Claire, so I thought it was an ideal opportunity for me to have this prepared for you. Oops, let's take that pin out. There we go. Right. So Claire wanted a floral one. Right. So I'll just lay that down there. I'm hoping that you can see from here I've actually top stitched all the way around the edge here, in a green thread actually, all the way around. So what we need to do now is actually to start to prepare the lining and everything. So what we're going to do is turn it over, and we're going to take the other piece of the lining fabric, which is the green in Claire's case, and lay this right sides together on the lining, like so. And I am actually going to put a couple of pins in there just to make sure I've got the tops nice and even. Now, what I'm going to do, I would advise you to stitch from the inside. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the outside fabric and I'm just going to roll that over and pin it out of the way because I do not want to catch it in. I'm just going to pop that up there and I'm just going to pop those pins in there, like so. Now, the lining is the area where we're going to turn the peg bag through. So you need to leave a gap somewhere on the bottom. It doesn't matter whether it's the sides or the bottom itself, about 3 inches, so that you can actually just turn everything through. If you want to make it a little bit bigger, that's absolutely fine. So I like to actually put a couple of pins just to remind me that I am actually going to stop sewing there to leave that gap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew from the top edge down to my first pin, then I'll stop sewing, leave it opening, So down and all the way round, but not sewing any of the top, the outside fabric. So just quickly go to the sewing machine and I'll do that. There we go. Already got my machine set up. And these really don't take very long to make at all. And because they are lined, they're actually quite strong. And if you had any of the PVC fabric, this could be made from the PVC as well, and it would work equally as well. There's my scissors gone, there you go. So I've just come off of that now, and I'm now going to actually start sewing from the second pin, making sure that I've left that gap ready for me to turn through. So I'm just going to sew straight down to the bottom. Turn, and I'm actually going along the bottom edge now. Still working on the lining. And on this side, I can sew straight the way up to the top. I don't have to leave a gap in this side at all. Speed that up a little bit. All the way to the top. And as things start to open up and we get to our quilting groups, and there'll be bazaars going on, Christmas things going on. These are always nice things that we'll sell at church or school events or quilters groups, because it's a practical item that everybody really needs. Okay, just take that one off there. Right, so we've now sewn the lining. So what we're going to do is now deal with the main part of the peg bag. So I'm just going to remove those pins because everything's now anchored together. I'm just going to drop that out to the edge. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the front fabric of the peg bag and lay it directly right sides together on the top of the fabric. So what we want to do now is separate this from the lining, and I'm going to sew all the way around this, just the front, not the lining. I'm not sewing through everything. I'm just sewing all the way around 2 layers of main front fabric. So just quickly do that. I like to sew it so I've got the lining facing me, because you can really see what's going on then. And you know that you're not catching anything in. You know, if you want to sew it from the other way and just pin it out the way, that's fine. But it just works for me that I've got it and I can visually see what I'm doing. Also, obviously, pegs can be quite heavy depending on what you have or how many you put in there. So if you choose to, once you've sewn all the way around it, you may choose to actually go round the whole part of the front fabric and actually stitch it for a second time, just to strengthen it, because pegs can become quite heavy. And you know, if we're going to put this time into making it, we want it to last. Just adjust that a little bit there. So we haven't got much more to do now, and the peg bag is very, very nearly finished. And I'm sure a lot of you I've actually got fabrics that you can actually run these up. And once you've done one, you realise how easy they are. And very neat as well, with that opening being turned. Right. So I'm just going to take that out. Oops. I'm going to trim that one off. Okay, so let's lay this down. So on one side, you will be able to see the main fabric, and on the other side, you will be able to see the lining. It doesn't matter which side you're working from at this point. It really, really doesn't. I'm going to work from this side because I think it'll be easier for the camera to pick up what I'm doing. So now what you need to do is take your coat hanger. No, she's not in that one. Claire's having a pink one because she wanted it to match her floral fabric. And I'm going to place, just going to give it a little press, just so I've got it central. I'm going to place the coat hanger at the top centrally, and I can feel here where I've got the actual shape of the circle on the inside. Now, what I would advise you to do is to actually draw around it once again. So I've got this marker here, and I'm just going to mark about a good ½ an inch away from the edge there and there. So I'll draw this out so you can see it. So I'm just going to bring the line down from the top, and I'm going around, down from the top and around. Now, oops, I'm hoping that you can see here, there's a line here and here, and this is where the coat hanger is going to come through. But because we've turned these edges, you've got no raw edges at the top, and I've drew around the top edge of the hanger, which finishes here. So what I'm going to do, I've just got my little ruler, and I'm just going to taper that down, that line down to the sew line that I've already got on my lining fabric, like so. And if you want to put a long ruler across to make sure everything's even, you can do. But because of time, I'm not going to. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew, not on the little piece coming down. I'm going to sew from the top of the hanger itself all the way down to about an inch beyond where I've drew on both sides. All right, so I'm just going to take that quickly to the sewing machine. Just placing the needle in there. And when you start this part, if you have a locking stitch, then lock the stitch at the top there. If you haven't, then just do a little reverse stitch at the top, because we want that to be nicely anchored. And I'm just sewing straight along the drawn line that I drew around the top of the hanger. And I'm just tapering that down so that it meets the seams on my peg bag. I've been using a different sewing machine this morning. It's one that lifts the feet up. So to come back to a sewing machine that is not lifting the foot up as a hover foot every time I use it, I keep forgetting that I've got to lift the back part up. And on this one, I'm just going to sew up here. Again, I'm just going to do a little reverse stitch there just to make sure that's anchored in nicely. And I'm just going to sew that straight around the top edge there, up to the neck where the coat hanger was. Just a little reverse stitch there, just to make sure everything's anchored nicely. Trim that off. All that remains to do now is just to trim this excess fabric away on this top edge. There. And once again on the opposite side. And I'm just leaving a 1/4 inch. Then all you need to do, if I just show you the shape of that beforehand, so if I move that, I'm hoping you can see, that's the shape of the top of the hanger. So if you pop your hand inside the lining, and you can just pull everything through, like so. Now remember, if you actually slip stitch or ladder stitch the inside, this can be totally reversible. Other than that, you can just sew that with the sewing machine, just to close that edge up, just like you would if you was doing a Christmas stocking or anything like that. And just need to push this through, and you can see it all comes together. And here, oops, if I get that in there, like so, I can take my hanger, place it through. Obviously, I wouldn't do this normally until I'd close that edge up and give it a really good press. But just for the purpose of making sure you can see the finished item, there is the peg bag that we've just made through the tutorial. So if you see it up closer, you can see it's got a really nice seam part. I haven't even pressed it yet. It's very neat. It's very strong. The hanger is completely covered, and actually wouldn't be too much of an eyesore if you did hang your peg bag in the kitchen. So that's how I choose to make my peg bags. I hope you have a go and have fun, and look forward to seeing you all again next week. Thank you for joining us, and bye-bye for now.